Hey, I'll just say hi. Yeah, I'm Big Poppy, also known as Steve Harvey. Sorry to disappoint. Everyone was probably hoping to hear the real Steve Harvey pop up on the call. But obviously, given everything that's gone on recently, I'm joining the call today. We'll be talking, with Bobby as we walk through all the questions that you guys had.
Yeah, thanks a lot for joining today. Um, so yeah, I mean, yesterday, of course, there was a big point of contention, which we're going to go through, and all the questions which Big Pappy has kindly curated, and he's here to help moderate some of that as well, any other questions which are in the chat. And then we'll finish up touching on the intended topic of the week, which was originally the V3 emissions. So yeah, about yesterday. Ironically, I was actually thinking that others would probably make a better directing team than I could do alone, and was going to actually offer the opportunity for expanded roles after V3, and all people had to do was ask. Unfortunately, the last 2 weeks has seen some internal politics for sure, and I guess when that didn't work out, people went to the community to try and force something instead, which was a shame. Again, just had to ask instead of working against everyone like that. Everyone lost out yesterday, and that's kind of a shame. So even amongst like all the frustrations of delays and the questions that were raised yesterday, no one really ever mentions or acknowledges the crux of the issue that we faced all this time, and really the main reason why we're here. And it's something which we've all known about for many months, and that is that there's just no original founding tech team, which was a major problem that we inherited from the previous owners back in last December. They had just used contractors, they just had a dev shop, and so we had to kind of pick things up and scrape things off its feet. So the Achilles heel has always been that we've been reliant on one developer, a very talented developer, for the last 8 months to do all of the core work alone, who has already an important real life position and a young family to look after. And that's all cool when you've got a brand new project and your motivation is really high. But being a sole developer is tough, and having a high profile job is tough. And especially when you're spending all your weekends at yAxis, it's just not feasible long term to maintain that kind of engagement without becoming fatigued and maybe winding back the time spent. That's kind of natural, right? And then on top, the consequences of a remote, a non-team, is that we don't always have the perfect insight we might otherwise have in a traditional work office environment to what each other is doing. So if someone's expected to achieve something and then they don't get around to it, that makes managing expectations both for ourselves and then the community quite difficult. And there's only so many kind of messages or DMs you can bug people with before it starts to become counterproductive. So what are the options in the situation that we kind of had? Well, get rid of the only dev that we have, or threaten people that are under pressure to work harder, or to make a big scene and point fingers at people. I don't really think that's the answer, because that would have left us actually in a much worse position and made things worse. So myself as a non-tech team member, and even the team lead, like, I'm totally replaceable. It's the developers that make the magic happen here, and they need to be looked after and respected. Because without the developers, there basically is no project. So the best thing in this situation was to basically shoulder the blame, accept some unpredictability, and shield the team, because that's what leaders do. Sadly, that's how it is. And securing some progress is better than none. And people were saying, well, let's just hire some more devs, right? Well, we have been looking for many months for competent people to step up and support, and that's been really difficult. There just simply aren't many devs looking around for a new project. They've all founded their own over this kind of bull run. It's been difficult to expect someone to then jump into a new position and kind of pick things up and be contributing effectively. So that's really like the entirety of the underlying issue. It's basically just dev power, and everything that was raised yesterday is basically kind of noise, or a knock-on consequence. So although we kind of had some dev delay for sure during era one, we all thought it was kind of behind us, and we were hopeful to move forward going into that C4 audit. And then I guess like chapter two of it all is that we were sat there then patiently awaiting audit. And you can imagine, like, if you're already slammed with work and responsibilities and you're looking forward to handing over to a new development team post V3, and then the C4 audit came out with 164 issues to resolve. Fuck, you know, like you can kind of imagine that feeling, right? Where you kind of throw up your hands and it's like, fuck, you know, I need a break from this. And to be clear, there's nothing wrong with that because it's a perfectly natural feeling to have. And I completely understand the concept of fatigue after pushing so hard for 24/7 basically, alone on the team and balancing multiple jobs and family and all this kind of stuff. So it's then that we really quickly moved to bring on the 5 new developers that we have that are needed to cross the finish line. And that's where we are today. And it's a really fortunate timing for us. Like it couldn't have been better. It's kind of saved the day for us. And now we're all able to piece together this launch. And whilst we can't guarantee timing, but if anything, if it's not on Sunday, it's going to be short after. So things are looking good from there. I mean, I get the people and even the team, like we saw yesterday, have grown super frustrated and looking to point fingers at people, and that's completely fair. But it's not fair to be receiving like threats or attacks. I receive like almost every morning from one particular person, like you better launch on the 10th or else I'm going to do X, Y, and Z to you. And that's really not the way to do software development, right? And despite sending a nice professional reply, still went to Twitter and kind of slammed me out over Twitter, which is not particularly nice. And that's the kind of stuff I have to handle as a project leader, and that's where DeFi takes its toll on people over time. But from my own previous experience, I'd say that leading any kind of tech project, and especially community-based DeFi platform like this, like yAxis, as a non-tech founder is a really difficult position to be in because you are 100% beholden to other people coming through for you. I mean, last night, for example, I was up all night talking to people, answering DMs, and that's all I can do right now. But if I could have done the tech work myself, I'd of course be working 24/7 to get things over the finish line. That's why usually the strongest teams in DeFi are led by a developer, and I strongly suggest that we look towards a tech leader in the future who, even when the shit hits the fan, can still guarantee people progress, updates, and meeting deadlines. That's kind of like my intro. So if there's any questions on that before we dive into Big Papa's list, I'm very happy to answer. Let me know if there's any questions in the chat, guys. Like, feel free to chime in.
Yeah, I see W Time just came up with a question. So this one, Bobby, this kind of feeds into some of the other questions about the budget. And so I think W Time, if it's okay with you, maybe that's one we can save. As we go down the list, I think there's going to be plenty of chances to talk about that kind of stuff.
Okay, no worries. So yeah, we'll move on to the questions from Big Pappy that he's created kindly for us. So yeah, everything that happened yesterday, these are kind of, and the questions raised are all kind of based on side issues that were designed to spark some outrage and to get attention. And none of those items kind of make any difference to that underlying crux that we've been carrying that I've just spoken about. And although they certainly highlight like where we could have learned from or things that we could do better. But yeah, for sure, I'll go through the list now. I've got it here in front of me. So yeah, clarity on performance of the fee on the vaults. Yeah, so roughly the end of May, we increased the performance fee on the underlying base curve yield on the vaults from 25 to 50%. And the base yield then was only around 2% of the time, right? Whilst the yAxis topping up the yield on the vaults was about 35%. So far and away the majority. And the effect of that change is a tiny amount of additional buybacks to offset the token sell pressure from the vault emissions to kind of better balance the yield sources. And as yAxis tokens were the majority of yield, a stronger token actually helps them over the base yield. So the APY shown on the UI was absolutely accurate, and that's for vault users to see. I mean, and ultimately, if something isn't working as a platform, it's for us to intervene. And at the time, we had one very large vault user, OXB1, that was just dumping like everything on us. And there's no secret in the harvest. We broadcast every single one in the buyback channel. And also, just to clarify that again, the performance fee is going to obviously return back to, we're looking at 10% for V3 going forward. Next up, 500,000 tokens to the MetaVault instead of 1 million. Yeah, so originally we were going with 1 million tokens during Era 1 to the vaults, but that was reduced down to just 500,000, limited to 500,000. And the remaining tokens were saved for later, or that they're still in the treasury or elsewhere, for example, the winter stash. The amount of emissions at a certain price only predicts the momentary TVL that we can get, not the yield. The yield is just like based on user demand, essentially, as people come and go. So no one loses out from this, any individual user. And this was simply us as a team acting to half the amount of the sell pressure coming from the vaults. And we're all definitely glad that we did that. Again, it's no secret, the APY is shown to users and is accurate, and people had a choice to deposit or not. Next, what is it? It's salary on the pay scale of the team. Yeah, so this was a big one from yesterday that was labored repeatedly, and I'll talk about it here in some detail. So we do have an agreement laid out on paper with everyone, with both pay scales and a list of like expectations from each other. And I think Mr. is able to share that in the chat channel for people to glance through as well, just for full transparency. Basically, it's $10,000 a month for a senior full-time role and $5,000 for a junior full-time role, with 500 or 800 yAxis on top. The part-time roles don't get any cash element, it's just the yAxis tokens. We also gave a month's advance as a joining fee to people, essentially as back pay, because most of the team members had been working for free for months, essentially before the Champions program started. We chose that payment method to provide some kind of guarantee to both parties. And we wanted people on board who are able to commit to like a 6+ months term to help us build out, to kind of give us that protection, rather than people coming and going. And sure, we could have lowballed people with like offering $3,000 a month, for example, but then they would just be simply leaving when something better came along, right? And with family or giving up a career in some case, it's only fair to provide like a commitment to a length of engagement. And 6 months from our side is something that we have respected, and it should be respected, right? And $10,000 a month, it's not actually a whole lot with a family, or if you're living in the Bay Area like Mr. is. It's certainly not like a big cash cow, as someone described it yesterday. Like, that's not really a fair reflection of that salary level. And for context, Badger gave up to $1 million a year for 11 operational people. That's different to the founding team. So the Abracadabra team, like I mentioned yesterday, they get 30% of all emissions, and they're doing really, really well, of course. But that's netted them $220 million in the last few months. That's a hell of a salary to get. So while I definitely agree that the payroll is healthy, and especially in some parts of the world, it's meant to be there to build and retain a core team, and it's not meant to attract temporary workers who are bouncing between different projects and different contracts. But listen, like in general, the DeFi space is paid really well, and that's because the opportunity cost is high. Just trading and investing your own capital during the bull run would have been way easier and way more lucrative than earning a salary at yAxis. If you just bet on Solana, for example, you'd be laughing. So yeah, in Era 1, we worked really hard before and during Era 1 and churned out a lot of different things, whether it's graphics and videos, the marketing, the website, contests and button hunts, the merchandise, different listings and partnerships and all this kind of stuff. And we had some huge business dev leads that were keen to come in on the new vaults as well. And it was all very kind of shiny and exciting. But as we became less confident of our dev bandwidth to work with third parties, we had to kind of choose to focus the resources on getting V3 out rather than distracting them with other things. And so, yeah, ultimately it's a tech platform. And so in Era 2, we felt very limited in what we can do, or what we can go to market with, essentially, kind of pending the release of the V3 vaults. And it's true that our output definitely slowed. So, for example, the partner program was a big central theme of Era 2, and that needs devs power to support, basically, to integrate other platforms. Without that, it's really hard to kind of progress with that. So the limitation is not really, so that limitation, I mean, it's not on individual team members. It's not their fault, and you can't go around breaking agreements that you've made with people and kicking people out that have got families to feed and are being paid a salary, essentially. That's not really like a proper way to manage a team. That's not really cool. But going forward, it's probably right to open things up, because we did this kind of before launch, like this is all kind of agreed before launch. And it's probably best to open up positions again to maybe formally sign off on salary structures that are there, let people apply for them if needed, and the community can decide who sits in what role, and to have a fresh start in that regard with no animosity kind of holding over people or being held against people in retrospect. What happened yesterday was an intention to bully people out of their positions right before launch, without anyone to replace them even, which is kind of insanity. And again, that's not really the way to go. Yeah, moving on. Damage control is the next question. So yeah, like we said, unfortunately, the community manager, has been scheming for a little bit of time already. Some internal politics going on, and the plan was basically to use these 2 new devs, which he has introduced to us, almost as leverage to take over the lead, which is fair enough. Actually, it's not even completely wrong to do that. But after we kind of had expanded and had a further 3 developers, that wasn't really like a leverage, I guess, over us anymore. And it wasn't a total surprise that he was going to do something desperate like yesterday. And in fact, we'd already moved scheduled meetings without him, and we'd created new chat groups, and we'd removed his editing powers, and we'd actually reached out to some partners in advance already, because we were kind of expecting something to happen, as sad as that is to say. Our main concern was actually he was going to pressure the new devs to leave with him and take them with him. But we had a phone call with them straight away yesterday, and they thankfully want to stay on, and we're happy to be working with them. I hope that's still the case, and they're good guys. As I mentioned earlier, I was actually expecting kind of and maybe with Cold Summer as well, because they're both very good at DeFi stuff and they've got their finger on the pulse, to lead a new chapter after V3. And we'd actually had some initial conversations about that with the new devs on board, and just had to ask, like, it was no need for what went down yesterday. I'm happy to step down anytime, like it's no problem for me. Yeah, I guess that's all there is to say on that. Next is, how do the devs track their work? Well, 2 methods are the main ones. It's through Trello and GitHub. So I think I gave a screenshot to Mr. earlier of the Trello, just to give an example of the front end Trello that's there. The new devs have been private on the C4 repo through the findings GitHub, and we have 3 different chat groups with the developers, one for strategy, one with the core devs, and then one with external contractors. And we've got a GitHub channel on Discord, which tries to give some kind of insight to any updates that goes on there. An organizational chart. Yeah, we actually had one originally when the Champs program was first launched, if you remember, Mr. But for me, it felt like pretty over the top. Like it's not a big team and it's pretty equal voiced, right? Essentially, I'm the non-tech founder and the manager of the non-tech side, and TNC is the tech founder and manages the development side. Under me are Mr. and DPK on the team, and then we had 3 champs as well. And the plan was to expand that champs program much further. That was the intention, to have many different contributors and with specific roles or tokens for contributions. Yeah, we were going to have 2 extra champs actually join very soon after launch, because we were swamped that first month. It was crazy busy for us, but it settled down pretty soon afterwards, and then we didn't need the extra manpower anymore. Communications. So there's a want to give more updates on the exact progress. Yeah, you and me both. Like, a complaint is that we're hiding information or we're not being transparent. One day people are saying we're so transparent and we communicate, and the next day they're saying we're not being transparent. The reality is we're giving all the information that we have, and if we're not saying something, it's because we simply don't know it ourselves to share that. That's the consequence of having falling levels of dev engagement, which then create a growing comms gap, which becomes hard to fix in a remote, anonymous kind of work environment. And then that creates missed expectations for both us internally as a team and for you, the community, and gives late notifications of things which are going to happen. So that's an unintended consequence. And yeah, with self-reflection, if there's something to definitely pin on me and something that I should have done better, it's that I've actually been purposely trying not to stress out or bug the developers because I knew they were struggling for motivation. I knew that they were under pressure. And maybe giving that a little bit of space actually helped us get through to where we are. But yeah, it's also possible that maybe that was a mistake and maybe that harmed things. Maybe that's actually delayed things. Maybe I could have been tougher and cracked the whip a little bit more. But yeah, I mean, ultimately, I tried to manage that in the way I felt would best achieve, success for the project in the big picture, whilst we were busy trying to source these new devs, which thankfully we have now. And yeah, we also should have insisted on a better sync process, I think, from the start between both the tech and business sides. That's totally fair to say. Other things that we took to change, like we've already got a weekly call schedule between the devs and community team to make sure there's alignment there. And we're also hoping to persuade one of the new devs to join the herd if they're not too shy. That would be great to have a different voice on as well. And we've got a tech role on the Discord as well, as you can see, which just provides a little bit of visibility for people to see they're online and working. And thankfully, they are all full-time developers now. They don't have any other roles to be doing, which is a really good thing for us. Yeah. Financial report there. Yeah, I mean, we were actually already putting that together for the start of Era 3 to kind of kick off that. So that's already in the works and it's essentially complete. So we'll release that shortly. We can't match every invoice to every transaction since the beginning, 7 months ago or something, 6 months ago. And it's also, we don't want to specify how much each contractor was paid, for example, like for doing marketing or video or something like this. But we'll of course show like the top-down view, like the different areas and how the money was spent. The next question, it is, can we exercise the Dow more? Yeah, and definitely, of course. Like another item that DPK is already working on is a Dow Transition Road Map, and the plan was to open up a forum post and to discuss what powers would be kind of given over bit by bit, and some sort of a general kind of timeline to work towards and how that will kind of work. At the moment, people do have a responsibility of adding and removing strategies, and there's one live vote up at the moment. But yeah, the aim is to be a fully fledged portfolio manager in the future, making larger decisions on fund allocations. And I think that's actually going to be quite fun, like for community engagement. You can imagine people kind of discussing different things and throwing in ideas because then everyone benefits from it, right? And then on the other side, the general DAO operation can be decided different things without becoming too bogged down in governance, which I know from a previous protocol is absolute nightmare. If you get bogged down in governments, it kind of slows everything up. So yeah, that forum post and blog is coming to firstly introduce the topic of transition towards a DAO with a roadmap, and we'll work towards that implementation. Absolutely. And yeah, I think it will foster a lot of community engagement. I think it will bring a lot of value to yAxis as a governance token as well, because I think we've all a little bit forgotten that yAxis is ultimately that governance token. Yeah, next question. Are we willing to elect new members? Sure, please take the role on. You know, it's not as easy as you think. It's easy to sit on the sidelines and say you would have done this or that, but it's really not been that easy. And I'm an experienced guy myself. We're all community source people and absolutely open to more community source people stepping up or replacing if that's what's needed. I'd just say be careful like who you choose, because handing keys over to, there's like 8 million tokens in the treasury now. That's a big leap of faith. And it takes a hell of a lot of strength actually to carry this weight, and what that represents, 8 million tokens on your shoulders. And signing up is a long-term commitment with a lot of responsibility attached. And that's something that I've had to deal with as well over the last year. But I also want to say that people are definitely free to blame me, and I want to take responsibility. Like, you know, you can fire me, ring me up, hang me out to dry. That's totally cool. But just please give the new guys a chance now that they're finally in place. It doesn't really matter what happens to me, because like I said before, I'm replaceable as a non-tech guy. What matters is continuity for everyone and protecting the developers that are now there and working to progress things. yAxis, like all of us, we've been trying for months to get into this kind of position where we have this level of firepower, and we really don't want to lose that chance by some overarching kind of drama thing. So I would say, like, absolutely we're willing to elect new members, but let's just wait until after V3 launch, right? Like, it's insanity to force a team change just days before launch. 10,000 tokens were sent to Linkfrog Poster. That's another thing which is going on and on ad nauseum. Yeah, the tokens were sent to Linkfrog Poster for a full review of the protocol he's done and writing a ton of unit tests for us. He's also done unpaid work before in the past around the springtime for the token launch, and he also built the monitoring systems and the vaults which we have in place. Measuring a dev's contribution and payment in a single snapshot based solely on GitHub comments is really dumb. Okay, and only someone with no software experience at all would say that. So if TNC says he got value, then I'm sure that is good enough for me. And sure, of course, we can argue on different amounts, the amounts and worth and all that kind of stuff, but then it's always difficult to find a balance with token volatility and different incentives. And generally on incentives, my note is to talk about marriage, which you believe, and the different married men will understand. People wonder often why so many marriages quickly fail. And for me, it's clear, like, it's just a matter of incentives and how the human mind works. Once you sign up and you make a transaction and you hand over the tokens for a bulk of work, for example, and in the case of marriage, all the tokens essentially, effectively, if you get the analogy, that they'll ever get in advance, regardless of their behavior, success or fail going forward, is actually a recipe for disaster, because you've just taken away all the incentives to be a good faith actor in that transaction. But up to that point of agreement, both parties were incentivized to be rational, decent, and provide value to a relationship or to the transaction. But after the tokens are exchanged, that incentive to follow through disappears, and things like engagement drops as well. And that's just human nature, and it's a common issue in the crypto world that I've seen many times. Happened in the previous team here at yAxis, and it's not a good thing to go. So yeah, it's nice to see that the space is generally moving towards vesting arrangements and models that can be paused or have a cliff at least. And I mean, Solidity vesting contracts are becoming more widely used all the time and shared between platforms. So I'm sure that will continue to grow in popularity. What is the V3 launch plan? The main difference of V3 over V2 is its ability to handle any type of asset. Meaning that we can literally copy paste a deploy script now to launch a new vault, just specifying the parameter of that asset which it accepts. So because of that, putting the legwork into the V3, but because of this, we're now in a position to scale up very quickly rather than having to write a new vault every time for each asset. The second innovation is the type of strategies which are possible with it. So there's three types of strategies. There's a native strategy, which directs deposits to something like Curve, and then like we do today, and we manually harvest and sell and compound the gains, right? The second type is delegated strategy, where we can deposit to Aave or compound, and where we'll borrow other tokens to deposit back into another strategy. That's a really cool thing for the non-stables. And then there's a meta strategy where we basically deposit into other yield aggregators just as a normal user would, such as Yearn, where there's no token for us to harvest, or there's little or no platform fees to pay for some vaults. The launch plan specifically, it's just to deliver the full product, right? Like, we are all very keen to do that. That's really the best thing that we can do after yesterday's fallout. And we're all intending to work together this weekend to get it going, basically. There's not a lot of purpose launching just the stables. Like, originally it would have been simpler just to do stables, but the whole point of the gauges is to vote between the different vaults, right? So it kind of reduces the point of it to do that. So we do want to shoot for the full platform at initial launch. And that is a possibility, unless some tech issue arises on the weekend. We'll definitely try. But again, cannot guarantee that, and don't threaten me with X, Y, and Z if that doesn't happen. It's just ridiculous. It will happen very soon after, if not on Sunday. The previously missing components we've had were converters, which basically handle a different array of tokens, such as a wrapped BTC or REN BTC into the same vault. And then all the ARB issues that we had in C4 that popped up will likely move forward with a slightly different design initially, where we only accept one token per vault. just to simplify the architecture while an optimal solution is found. So it will, for example, just depositing DAI into the stable vault, or just wrap Bitcoin into the Bitcoin vaults, whilst we work on having these arrays. Then, we needed to have the strategies for each of the vaults to be possible. So we needed an individual strategy for the Link and for ETH and Bitcoin, and that's been worked on over this week by Frank, and it's actually ready to be deployed now. Just need to have the original MIM strategy merged, which actually I'm getting pinged about by TNC now. So hopefully that's all ready to go for the crunch over the weekend. We'll have a simple convex native strategy in place for each of those vaults. We're not going with a meta strategy or delegated strategies. That will be one of the priorities after V3, is to write those delegated strategies with the aim to be like, initially at least, all on convex, to move towards treasury diversification and earning a slice of that CVX governance similar to the Badger helper vaults. So basically the last couple of weeks has been great. It's seen some huge strides taken, and we're moving really fast, and it's looking much better than it did a couple of weeks ago. And so rather than like hoping on things to happen, like now we can much more certainly know that things will happen, right? And we're looking to continue that momentum post-launch. Beyond V3, the product plan at a high level is to, like I said, to firstly write these delegated strategies, which will substantially boost the base yield on non-stable vaults, so that we don't need to support them with emissions. Then we want to look to launch on Arbitrum and Avalanche, and later Cello, or Cello, however you pronounce it, with the new team, with Hasm Goblin. And then I think the way that we're heading is that we want to have a lending and borrow feature, which has become the proven strategy of getting TVL essentially without having too many emissions, or zero emissions even, whilst then the yield in the vault pays down the debt. So we're looking at something like that as an optimal way of progressing and expanding the platform. And that's all of it. That's the questions. So thanks for going so easy on me and not giving me too many ones to make me sweat. I hope that's been kind of clear in what I said, and of course happy to answer more questions now, or in the put them in the channel or in the DMs as well. Like, we're all kind of here to try and be as open as possible, and try to do the right thing, right? So I'll just take a quick break there to let other people speak in case there is a question.
Yeah, Bobby, I wrote down a couple notes as we are going through, and I think the whole community really appreciate you taking the time to go through all of this. I know it's been a heck of a couple of days for everyone on the call, but one of the ones was, and this was a thought, talking to Mr. and from something you said earlier, when you look at the GitHub and Discord, that doesn't reflect all the work. And I know for a lot of folks, quite a lot probably do not work in IT, do not work as engineers. So to them, that's the first and only impression of the work being done. But you mentioned the C4 repo has quite a bit of work in there as well. Obviously, we don't need to see it, but are you able to speak to just kind of approximately, the sheer number of issues being worked through in that repo?
I mean, the repo is private and controlled by C4, so we can't give everybody access to that, and that's for a reason why it goes through the judging process. Where we've got to exactly on that is that and Mr. please correct me, is that I think they finished off every label but 5, but that was a couple of days ago, so maybe they finished off those 5 by now. I'm not sure. Mr. can probably clarify that.
Yeah, we've closed the gap on labels. I think we have one outstanding that may not even need a label, but we're there. Yes.
Yeah, and from day one of the contest, it's been open to us, which means that we've also been fixing issues where we can at the beginning. And then when the new guys joined in as well, they've been jumping in, and they're making a lot of PRs as well. The good thing about yesterday is that it definitely lit a fire up our developers. So they basically hopped on and closed a lot of the issues out and are working hard. So that's actually an unintended bonus for us that happened.
Okay. Yeah, because I think you said before it was something like, was it 150, 160, and I know some of them are duplicates, but you still have, someone has to go through that many tickets, right, and review each one and determine whether or not it's a duplicate, and then continue to work on it, right?
Yeah, it's not an easy process, and even I was chipping in trying to do the ones with my limited tech knowledge. Yeah, so it's not been such a simple case, and making correct decisions on what the fix is going to be without affecting something else negatively is also important. So it's not something that you can do carelessly, and needs some thought into it and some collaboration. But what we've done from day one of the new guys coming aboard is to use it as a chance to onboard them, essentially as an onboarding exercise. That's the way it's described, to go through it and have a really deeper understanding of the code. And although it's taken some time and it's very hard for them to dive into the project, actually what's going to come out of it is that they'll have a much better understanding of the way things work for future progress and future iterations, and future fixes that need to happen.
Yep. No, it's a good point. So if you don't mind, then I have a few more that I just pulled from the chat. So if we want to just walk through those, I think it'll only take a few minutes, and then you guys can move on to whatever your other agenda items are, if that's okay.
Yeah, shoot.
All right. So the next item I have, so the budget info. I know this one's one that a lot of people are curious about. And you guys did post in, I think, the Champions program with kind of the breakdown of the rates. But you're also, to be clear, you're providing some sort of, I guess, transparency report as far as expenditures, right? An actual budget, what we're spending at a high level, at least in the different areas of the project.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I touched on it earlier. That was something which was already in the works for the start of Era 3 that was supposed to come out. So that's basically done off. We're just making sure that it's all as accurate as can be and filled out as much as it can be. So yeah, I think that's a nice insight to have. But yeah, just like I said before, we don't want to say this person, this third party got paid exactly this much, because it's not fair to kind of dox people's rates and stuff like this. But yeah, we will try and give a high level overview of how things have been spent.
Sure. So the next one, this was a question about the new dev team. Without doxing them, would the team consider sharing basically their credentials, their experience, or even some watered down version of their resumes? I know going forward, we talk about implementing the Dow, and we haven't been to that point yet, so it's understandable that folks aren't really engaged in understanding kind of the skill set that these folks bring to the team. So I think they're just retroactively just curious, what kind of folks do we have as engineers?
Yeah, so I think across the five devs that we've got, there's quite a broad range. Really, Goblin has, they are like a team from before. They've worked on a different platform before. They've been tinkering around with Solidity, and in the case of Has, like computers his whole life, he was telling us. And yeah, they've been doing lots of things here and there, over in DeFi especially, over the last year. So they've already had another project before, which is nice. Then, for example, some of the security researchers we were fortunate to find through the C4 program. So they're very experienced professional auditors and specialists in security, etc. And they were happy to work with us, so we have them contracted essentially to stay with us, and that's really nice. And then the fifth guy is Frank, and Frank is actually, we found him from he won a hackathon contest at Badger for writing strategies. So that was we reached out to all the people that had won prizes in that hackathon, and Frank is one of those guys. And actually, Frank has been very impressive, the rate of output he has. He whipped up those strats really quickly, and the converters and everything like this. And Frank has actually got experience in this lending and borrow platform before, so we're hoping that he can lead us on that feature as well, building out whilst Goblin and Has focus on the core stuff.
Okay. No, thank you, Bobby. So two more questions. This one I think's been brought up and may have even been answered before, but it's asking who holds the multi-sig keys.
Yeah, there's 4 people on the multi-sig. It's myself, TNC. Oh, sorry, 5 now. It's myself, TNC, Gouda, Mr. and DPK.
Okay, thank you. And the last one is just a question about the Haichi, I guess that's how you say it, the status of that audit.
Yeah, we don't know. We're expecting to hear back from them at the end of today, but it's already past business close over in South Korea. So, I can reach out to the guy on Telegram and try and get an answer. Hopefully they can have some sort of initial report to share with us. Otherwise, I guess we'll look to Monday. But again, we're not expecting it to be majorly majorly substantial, the stuff from Haichi, because we're not that confident compared to the guys at C4. Like the C4 stuff was awesome. So it's really given us a lot to work with already, and I kind of doubt that anything can be added on top of that.
Yeah, I agree. The C4 audit was really impressive in its scope. And actually, there's one more. We might as well just hit this, and then I'll go back on mute. But you guys mentioned the additional emissions to make up for the law we had, and I think they're just looking for confirmation that that's still the case. That when we resume, that the V3 staking will make up for that break in emissions.
Yeah, so actually that was meant to be the topic of the call was the emissions, and I was typing up a document yesterday when that infamous message dropped, and then it's kind of got distracted by everything. So that's only like partway finished, but yeah. So really, with the upcoming release, we wanted to share a little bit of the plans for the emissions and the new contracts, and ultimately to enable people to show support for that or deny support for that through a vote. And learning from the first era, we'll in the votes at least, we'll be going with less tokens because we got slammed initially out the gate on those strategies. We didn't have really high yield, like they were massively topped up and overbalanced with the yAxis tokens. And we'll be also focusing on higher base yield strategies such as the MIM, the Abracadabra MIM, strategy on Convex, which is like 35, 38%, something like that at the moment, which is fantastic. We'll also start relatively low and then look to ramp up emissions in line with organically growing TVL, hopefully, rather than the other way around. So what that looks like is something like 25 to 50,000 tokens a month. We've got a spreadsheet to see all the different various outcomes. To begin with, that is initially, and the aim is for Vault users to want to lock in those yAxis in, right, and then vote to compete for their own Vault to get an increasing share of emissions and kind of twist it in their favor. That's the concept of it, rather than give them so much yAxis that they're drowning in it and they're just pressing the sell button all the time. The staking rewards will be supplemented by the Great Harvest. So we promise 600,000 tokens over 3 months to stakers for locking up in the gauges, that is. So you have to lock in the gauges to receive anything. That's just the way that the contracts work. But the minimum time is only a week. So the longer you lock for, the greater the share of emissions. And someone who locks for 1 year, it used to be in the original curve contracts, it's 4 years, but we knocked off the 4 years because we're not planning to have 4 years of emissions from here. So we knocked it down to just 1 year. So anyone who locks up for 1 year gets considerably more than someone who locks for a week, but it does depend on how many of your peers vote for that. So it's its own mini gauge if you see it like that. So instead of competing between Bitcoin, Ethereum, and Link, you're competing against each other to get a higher stake of the emissions. And yeah, again, the aim is to ramp up to find a sweet spot rather than go ballistic and drown people on day one, as it's easier to top up than to start high and reduce. And we kind of want to see, I guess, the initial behavior of people, whether they are locking up for a year or whether they are just turning around and dumping yAxis before we kind of make a commitment like that. The LP starts in the same way as today. There's no gauge for the LP. So we'll be kept at these kind of levels for now. And we're actually talking with Olympus Pro about the protocol-owned liquidity, which is becoming a proven model, and seeing if that's a good fit with us. So we're over there in their Discord having a conversation. DeFi needs liquidity to remain tradable, basically. And the two options are to either pay for a huge listing fee on a central exchange, which is a ridiculous listing fee, by the way. It's like 250,000 for a tier 2 exchange. Or the other option is to forever sync your tokens into an LP like we do today. And that's just not sustainable forever. Like if you're building a platform for it's going to be around in 5-10 years, you just can't do that. You'd run out of tokens a long time ago. So what's great about Olympus Pro is that gives us another way which will ultimately save tons of emissions over time and guarantee liquidity on the exchanges well past the end of natural emissions. It's whereby essentially people are able to buy discounted tokens using their LP tokens as a currency essentially, and over time slowly the protocol yAxis owns the liquidity pool itself, which means that you can take control of it and don't actually need to reward yourself with emissions. So yeah, I've got a spreadsheet which allows people to play around with the different emissions on the vaults, the performance fee, the TVL, the base yield, and to compare the outcome versus just simply staking yourself on Convex, which is also a valid thing for experienced people to do. Like it's definitely valid to say that it's really expensive to compound on Convex yourself right now. And yeah, there's people like Badger, the Helper Vaults, are doing something similar to that. But there's a lot of value in pooling together the funds. And because of that, you can kind of make a decision on how much you want to reward Vault users, where it becomes effective for them to actually deposit with us instead of directly through Convex. But yeah, just to round that off, of course, I'm working on the wider documents, and we'll share that with the spreadsheet for emissions. And our aim was to start a vote today to be ready by Sunday.
I appreciate that, Bobby. I don't have anything else, and I'm looking at the comments community as far as my contribution here, and our questions I think have been answered. So really, it's I guess we can hand it back to you guys into your normal agenda. But thank you.
No worries. No, it's I guess that's kind of the agenda for today, right? And it's amazing to see so many guys on, like 54. That's a massive record-breaking achievement. I think the most I've ever seen on before was like 25. So that's really cool, and I hope many more will be able to watch this online after it gets posted on the podcast. Yeah, Wally or Mister, is there something else that you guys want to say?
No, just confirming it's an all-time high attendance, so we hit a record today. But I think you covered all the bases, Bobby. I just want to reiterate, from where we sit, the everything that we've been focused on has always been to protect token holders, right? And that has been our guiding light. It has been our North Star. And it's clear that with better communication, we could have given that context ahead of time rather than addressing it, in retrospect as we are today. But, that was the intention, and it remains our intention, right? But as far as the other questions that Bobby's addressed, I think, nothing really to add there. So thank you, Bobby.
No worries. Yeah, so it's been a super long one. That's almost an hour. Thanks very much for joining. I guess we'll wrap it up there. Like I mentioned before, you're very welcome to DM me or to ask questions in the channel. Or I do recommend just hanging around till launch and seeing how things go. Let's give the new developers a chance to prove themselves, and we're very happy to answer everything and take action, all the DAO, and giving people a lot more say and all this kind of stuff as we move forward. So there's no worries there. Thanks very much. And I also want to apologize for the awkwardness of yesterday. It was really nasty business, and it was, of course, pretty difficult to sleep last night. Quite a shocking thing to go through, and it was quite hard as well, because we've tried to really cultivate the community over the last 6 months, and it was a real shame to see that. So thanks again to everyone, and hopefully speak to you in the Discord.